Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. The book key felt warm in my palm, like it knew something I didn't. I could almost hear Walter's voice in that dry, steady way he had. Start with the kids. I was 35 then, broke in more ways than I like to admit, sitting in a too-tight suit across from Walter Ellison's lawyer, Mr. Dunleavy. My palms itched, the cuffs bit into my wrists. I hadn't worn a suit in over a year. Didn't have a reason? Walter was my grandfather. He wasn't soft, but he was steady. Showed up when others didn't. He passed in February. I told people I was fine. I wasn't even close. Kara, my wife at the time, sat 2 chairs behind me with her arms crossed so tight it looked like a warning sign. Her mother, Bev, was next to her, whispering little sighs like punctuation. I felt their eyes drilling into my back as Mr. Dunleavy cleared his throat and started reading the will. Walter left about $7.3 million in a managed trust. Most of it wasn't mine. That part came after a long pause. I braced myself. Dunleavy reached into a drawer and slid over a small leather keychain with 5 old metal keys. Each one had a brass tag with a symbol. A book, a music note, a spool of thread, a lamp, and a dollar sign. Tucked under the ring was a thin paper rail pass. 30 days, coach class, anywhere Amtrak would take me. Next came a folded paper road map. The old school kind with creases like scars and pencil lines tracing a path through a dozen states. A velvet pouch followed. Inside were Polaroids with names scribbled on the back. Dunleavy's expression didn't change, but the way he watched me said this was the real inheritance. He read the clause like it was a challenge. Meet the people in the photos. Listen, and do the small thing they asked. Something to help their community. No planes, only trains or buses. Walter's note tucked in the map read, "Let the miles put you back together." Quick note before we dive in, share in the comments which city or country you're listening from. I'd love to see where everyone's tuning in from today. Thanks. Now let's get into the story. Kara's sigh turned into an eye roll so sharp I heard her neck pop. He needs a job, not a scavenger hunt, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Bev muttered something about playing Wanderer under her breath. I made the mistake of asking how soon this would be over. Dunleavy didn't blink. He just tapped the keychain. It begins, he said, when you choose to start. The first Polaroid showed a narrow workbench inside a bookstore. Scraps of leather, tiny screwdrivers. On the back, in Walter's uneven scrawl, Silas Benedetti, Ohio, Journals for Kids. Bev leaned in close and hissed, "Leave the keys, sell the old house, and move on." This is ridiculous. I didn't answer her. I just slipped the rail pass into my wallet like it might disappear if I didn't. Truth is, I wanted to chuck the whole thing, go home, crawl back into the mess I knew, the shame I was comfortable in. But I couldn't get Walter's voice out of my head. He was dead and he still made more sense than I did. So I booked a seat on the morning train. As we stepped into the hallway, Kara touched my arm and said, "Don't drag this out, Lawson." I didn't answer her either. Not really. I just looked at the map, at the way Walter had traced his path like a plan only he understood. I wasn't dragging this out. I was dragging myself out, and that first key in my hand, it didn't feel like metal. It felt like a reason to get up in the morning. The train pulled in just after noon. The brakes bit down and the cars shuddered to a stop. I stepped off into a warm Ohio breeze that smelled like fresh mulch and exhaust. I didn't check the weather. I didn't check my phone. I pulled out the map and followed Walter's old pencil line like it was gospel. It led me straight to a city library tucked between a payday loan place and a shuttered diner. The steps were cracked. The door creaked. Inside, the air smelled like old pages and carpet glue. It was perfect. I found locker 317 near the back by the old microfilm readers. The book icon key slid into the lock with a soft click, like it had just been waiting for me to catch up. Inside was a folded Polaroid of a small workbench cluttered with leather scraps and tiny clamps, and a short note in Walter's careful hand. "Silas, 2 streets off Main. Ask about the journals." I turned the photo over in my hands a few times before heading out. A few blocks later, I found a corner shop with no sign, just the smell of leather and wood glue leaking through the screen door. I knocked once. The door opened before I could knock again. The man standing there looked like a retired wrestler who'd taken up pottery. Thick arms, bent nose, soft eyes. His shirt was threadbare and spotted with dye stains. His hands were all scars and stories. "You must be Lawson," he said, like he'd been expecting me all day. "Walter said you'd come by." I nodded and stepped inside. I'm still not sure why I did. He laughed once, low and steady. He kept me afloat after my flood. He said I didn't have to earn it, just keep earning it. Silas's workshop looked like a place where time didn't matter. Everything was quiet, warm, and used. Shelves full of tools, leather rolls stacked in corners. A box fan hummed in the window, barely moving the air. He led me past a row of hand-stitched notebooks. Clean, thick covers, little flecks of thread still stuck to some spines. Your granddad said, "Give a kid a blank page and don't tell him what to write." That stuck with me. We've got 36 journals ready for the middle school club. They're expecting us. We loaded them into canvas totes and drove 10 minutes across town in his dusty pickup. The school looked tired. Bricks faded, windows half covered in paper stars. The writing club met in the cafeteria where the soda machine was busted and the chairs were too small. Then I saw her. Ms. Paxton, short haircut, purple cardigan, eyes sharp but not mean. She looked at me like she was flipping through old files in her brain. Then she said, "You drew cars in the margins of your book reports. You copied the back cover of Call of the Wild and called it a summary." I rubbed the back of my neck. Still draw sometimes. I read more now, I think. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "It's good you came." We set the journals on the table. Kids started showing up. Backpacks slapping against their sides, sneakers squeaking. Most looked tired. A few looked curious. A kid with a shaved head and giant headphones asked, "Can I use mine for lyrics?" "Use it for whatever matters to you," I said. And I surprised myself by meaning it. He nodded like I'd passed some kind of test. We passed out all 36. Some kids flipped straight to the back. One girl smelled hers. I caught myself watching too hard and made myself look away. But something cracked open a little in me, like a busted hinge that suddenly worked again. Silas leaned over and said, "Your grandfather paid for my first sewing machine after the storm. Didn't want a plaque, just said he wanted the shop to stay open. Back at the bindery, he asked if I wanted to keep the key on its own or add it to the ring." "Add it," I said without hesitation. He took a small strap of leather and punched a hole clean through. Then he looped it through the ring and snapped it shut. "So you don't lose your mission," he said. I pocketed the key ring and gave the room one last look. The journals, the tools, the slow patience built into the walls. It felt like the kind of place Walter would have liked to just sit in. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Kara. I stood there listening to her voice in the afternoon sun. "Day 1 of your little rail pass, cute. When you're done playing, call me." I didn't even hesitate. Deleted it. Opened the map and folded it flat in my lap like it could shield me. I stared at the line Walter had drawn next. Before I caught the bus to the next leg, Miss Paxton walked out to the curb with something folded in her hand. A kid had drawn it with crayons, me holding a giant key like a sword. Most of them don't have dads around. "That kind of stuff sticks," she said, then handed it over without waiting for a reply. I took it, folded it small, and tucked it in my wallet next to the rail pass like it was a receipt for a debt I hadn't even known I owed. The sun shifted just enough to catch the metal of the next key on my ring, a music note. I ran my thumb over it and turned the map to the next page. The line arrowed me toward North Carolina. The name written next to it was Rena Solano. The Greyhound wheezed into Asheville before sunrise. The sky cracked open just enough to show I hadn't slept. I followed the map line through 2 intersections and a sloping hill into a downtown that felt half awake, half abandoned. A jazz tune drifted from a bar cleaning up beer bottles, and the pavement still shone from a quick shower. The bus station sat between a closed tattoo shop and a soul food place with fogged-up windows. The lockers were lined up against a wall that smelled like old gum and mopped tile. I found mine by the sticker-covered door. Half-torn band logos, a faded call sign sticker, and a peeling bumper sticker that just said, "Nope." The music note key turned stiff, but it gave. Inside was a Polaroid of a soundboard cluttered with tape, post-it notes, and an old mic with a red foam top. On the back, Rena Solano, Community FM, read the note, announced the stipend. That was it, no fluff. Walter never bothered with fluff. The station was in a 1-story red brick building with ivy choking the gutters. I knocked on a side door with a taped-up sign that said, "Ring harder." Before I could hit it again, it swung open. She stood there with big headphones around her neck and a coffee mug that said "Off Air" on edge. "You Lawson?" she asked. One eyebrow lifted like it was a test. "Yeah, you better be. Walter didn't leave this mic to just anybody." She smiled then. "Not polite, real." She waved me inside. The station smelled like burnt coffee, dust, and wires. Soundproof foam hung on the walls like half-torn wallpaper. A guy with blue hair nodded at me as he walked by with a coiled cable over one shoulder. Walter pulled me off the road when I was ready to walk away from every bar gig in the southeast, she said. Guiding me into a cramped booth with a glass window facing the soundboard, he said, "Sing in smaller rooms if it gets too loud in your head." I thought he was crazy. She poured us both the worst coffee I've ever tasted. I drank it anyway. Then she handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a typed 3-paragraph thank you note in Walter's voice. Plain, honest, no dressing, just to the neighbors who show up when no one's looking. The second paragraph explained the fund. The last one dared whoever heard it to keep the door open behind them. "We go live at noon," Rena said, setting her mug down, her eyes steady. "You good with a mic?" "Not really good with much these days," I said, and immediately regretted how true it sounded. She shrugged. "Honest works." Before we started, she pointed to a stack of cue cards. "Don't read those. They're for posers. Read his note. Say it like you mean it. Announce the stipend." The red-on-air light glowed, and my stomach twisted like I'd just stepped off a roof. Rena did the intro tight and smooth, then slid the mic my way. I read the note. Voice shook at first, caught on the word steady. I swallowed and kept going. No jokes, no commentary, just Walter's words. Then I said it. Starting today, the Walter Ellison First Notes Fund will provide $2,500 annually, broken into small stipends for first-time recording artists in this region. No application fees, no forms longer than a page. First come, first ready. I heard myself say it, and I knew full well I wasn't just reading. It was a promise. One I didn't write but was still mine to keep. The phone line lit up before I could even lean back. Rena held up a finger and hit the line. A woman's voice cracked over the speaker. "My boy writes songs in our laundry room. He needs strings." "He won't ask." "I'm asking." I grabbed a pen off the console and wrote his name down on my hand. "Tell him Lawson heard him. We'll figure it out." Rena nodded like I'd passed something unspoken. She played an old tape after. A scratchy clip of Walter speaking at a station event years ago. He said, "Don't run every red light, kid. Let some streets slow you down. That's where the real stuff happens." It made me bite the inside of my cheek. That voice landed heavy and kind at once. Then my phone buzzed. Travis, an old coworker. His text just said, "Heard you on 92.3, didn't know you had it in you." Felt like someone cut a strap across my chest I didn't know was tight. Another buzz. Email this time. Dale Rohr, my ex-boss. The subject line was tool return notice. The message was worse. "Return the orbital sander you borrowed or I file a report." I never took that sander. Dale knew it. He also knew I didn't have the money or patience for a legal back and forth. I guess my face changed because Rena leaned over and looked straight at me. "Let the small men shrink by themselves," she said. Quiet but not gentle. I nodded, didn't say a word. She handed me a sticker. Community FM's logo, hand-drawn, a little off-center. I peeled the back and stuck it on my notebook. Then she pulled me in for a hug. I didn't dodge it. There was a little jar by the door labeled coffee and strings. I dropped in 2 crumpled bills, maybe $7. I figured that'd cover a couple strings at least. Outside, the sky was warmer. The street buzzed in that slow southern way. I pulled out the map, unfolded it with 2 hands. The next pencil line snaked north, wide curves through Missouri into Kansas. I ran my fingers over the next key. The spool of thread felt warm but strong, like something that held people together when they wanted to fall apart. I boarded the bus out of Asheville with Walter's voice still echoing in my ears, and the soundboard's red light burned into my memory. The town didn't have a name that meant anything to me. Just a post office, 2 gas stations, and a diner with an upside-down E on the sign. But Walter's pencil line stopped here, so I did too. The post office was baked in prairie dust and sun-faded to beige. Inside, the clerk didn't even look up when I walked past. Box 208 sat near the bottom row, dull gray and humming with heat from the wall. The thread key slipped in smooth, no fight. The padded envelope inside had weight to it. I tore it open on the bench outside and found 3 things. A few fabric swatches in deep indigo and warm gray, a Polaroid of a chalk-lined cutting table, and a note in Walter's tight, familiar script. Hada Tailors. Ask for Jamal or Rana. 2 toolkits for apprentices. No directions, just names, like always. The shop sat behind a faded laundromat. No sign, just a chalkboard on the window that read, "Hem your hope." The smell hit before the door even opened. Steam, black tea, and warm linen. I stepped in and felt the kind of quiet you don't get in cities anymore. Jamal looked up from a pressing table, his hands busy, his eyes sharp but tired. He wore a pinstriped vest and had a small gold scissor charm clipped to his collar. "You must be Lawson," he said, like he already knew I'd come. "Walter said you'd arrived dusty and doubtful." "I nailed both," I said. He laughed soft and brief, then waved me in. The place was tight and lived in. Spools of thread sat stacked in color-coded towers. 2 long tables split the space, one for measuring, one for cutting. Steam drifted from a corner press like a ghost that hadn't left yet. He pointed to a framed certificate above the register. "Walter sponsored our National Guild entry." "Didn't ask, just did it." Said, "Don't argue with the man who's already seen your work." The frame looked expensive. I never would have noticed it without him pointing. Rana came out from the back with her sleeves rolled up and a chalk pencil in her hair. She handed me a warm cup of tea before saying a word. "We don't have customers today," she said. "Just apprentices." That's when I noticed the 2 standing near the window, Marta and Chris. Both looked barely 20, both in thrifted clothes, shoes worn down to the sole. They stood like they didn't want to take up too much room. Jamal laid out 2 pages from a supply catalog. Each toolkit was listed at $620. Shears, rotary blades, seam gauges, wax, needles, snips, thread rolls, and a lockable caddy for each. My pulse kicked up. I counted it twice in my head. "We can stitch without them," Jamal said, "but they'll stitch longer with them." I pulled out my phone and held it up. Walter left a vendor account at Mid-State Sewing. "Still active," Jamal said. He had it set up years ago. Never used it for himself. I called Mid-State and gave the account info. The rep confirmed it and took the order. I gave my name, signed the confirmation digitally, and stared at my signature a beat longer than I should have. "Make them better than us," I said as I handed the phone back. Jamal smiled. Not wide, but like I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. Marta stepped forward and said, "Do you think we could add left-handed shears to mine?" She lifted her left hand like she needed proof. Jamal didn't hesitate. "Do it." I nodded and signed the adjustment with a steadier hand than the first. Chris shifted his weight and said, "You ever work with your hands?" His voice was deeper than I expected. "Used to," I said. Made signs, fixed up chairs, nothing elegant. Then I stopped. "Why'd you stop?" he asked. Felt like I didn't have a reason to keep fixing things no one wanted. He nodded like that made a little too much sense. A stool near the back wobbled as I sat. I flipped it over and checked the bracing screw. Loose. I tightened it by hand, then nudged the legs until they stood solid. Nobody clapped. Didn't need to. It just felt right. Rana brought out a small plate of dates and set it in front of me without a word. "He fixed our heater once," she said, looking at the shop wall like she could still see him. It was January. Walter came in for a cuff repair, heard the unit kicking wrong and opened it up right there on the floor. "Did he charge you?" I asked. "No," she said. "He told us to save for needles." I pictured him kneeling under their thermostat, sleeves rolled back, adjusting the pilot with those big old fingers. Jamal walked me to the door when it was time to go. He handed me a printed receipt and a small round tin wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" I asked. "For threads that want to unravel," he said. "Beeswax, you run it along the strand. Makes the line hold when things get rough." I slipped it into my pocket and thanked him. At the depot, I opened the map to find the next leg. Something felt different, like the page had shifted. There was a note tucked in the fold, one I hadn't seen before. Looked like it had been pressed in tight from the beginning. It was just one line in Walter's sharp block letters. "Pace yourself." I looked out across the empty platform and let those 2 words settle. The lamp key waited next, its brass tag shining steady in the late light. The map line curved northeast now toward Michigan, and a name that made my stomach turn. Harland Keating. The train from Kansas rattled north for almost a full day. By the time I hit Michigan, the sky looked washed out, the color of cold milk. Walter's map line ended at a small town I hadn't seen in years, half industrial, half forgotten. The wind smelled like old lumber and diesel. The address led me to a mini storage facility just off a frontage road. Every unit looked the same. Corrugated metal, padlocks, dust lines streaking the doors like stripes on an old shirt. Mine was number 41. The lamp key clicked into place cleanly. The tag's back had Walter's block letters. Gate code 1239, typical of him, simple, no fuss. Inside was a plain wooden workbench under a gooseneck lamp, both covered in a film of sawdust. The bulb still worked when I flipped the switch. On the bench sat a Polaroid of the same scene, almost identical except the light in the photo looked warmer, like Walter had been standing right there when he took it. On the back, Keating Makerspace and Tool Library. Signed the youth passes. Another note below it, his handwriting less steady but just as firm. Hands first, talk second. I stared at that phrase for a while, then folded the picture into my pocket and headed for the address listed on a flyer tacked to the wall. Keating Makerspace. The building used to be an auto garage. The old lift mark still scarred the concrete floor. Through the big front windows, I could see people moving in every direction. Noise, motion, and purpose blending into one thick hum. The kind of noise Walter would have called good noise. Harlan Keating met me at the door. Tall, blocky, hair silvered at the edges, chin up like a guard dog who'd learned manners but still kept his teeth sharp. "I used to hate your grandfather," he said the second our hands touched. His grip was like a clamp. "I believe you," I said. He snorted. "He beat me on 3 bids in one summer, then hired me when my shop went under. He made me better than I wanted to be." He led me inside. The air was thick with sawdust, machine oil, and effort. Kids learned to square boards at one table. A grandma tried out a 3D printer at another. A man on parole, ankle monitor visible, checked out a drill from a volunteer. Everything looked half-finished and fully alive. Harlan grabbed a clipboard off a workbench. "Walter prepaid 40 youth passes, 1 year each. Just needs your signature to activate," he said. "You'd know why." I looked at the blank line and hesitated. For a second, it felt like that signature meant something heavier than paper. Then I wrote Lawson Ellison clean and slow, and under it, in Walter's name. Harlan nodded once, the kind of nod that meant he approved but wasn't going to say it. He took me to a locked cabinet in the corner. Inside, among old chisels and saw blades, lay a hand plane with a small nick in the tote. He picked it up and held it like a relic. "Your grandfather's," he said. "Used it until the handle cracked. Wouldn't replace it. Said flaws give you grip." I ran my palm over the wood. The surface felt smooth, worn from decades of use. I saw flashes of myself at 11 standing in Walter's shed, trying to build a birdhouse that leaned like a drunk. Walter never corrected me. He just said, "You'll see it straight when you earn straight." My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping the memory clean in half. I pulled it out and saw Kara's name. Her newest post glared at me. A photo of my rail pass laid across our old kitchen table. Caption: "When your husband chooses a field trip over life." Bev's comment sat right below it, a clapping emoji. Harlan caught the change in my face. "Bad news?" "Just noise," I said, setting the phone face down on the bench. He leaned against the counter. Old me would have driven over there and said something I couldn't take back. New me builds a bench and lets it hold my weight instead. I gave a short laugh, one without much humor. "You sound like him." "I fought like him too," he said, eyes narrowing. "Walter and I spent 20 years pretending we weren't friends. Then one day, he dropped off a crate of safety goggles with no note. I knew it was him. He'd seen the kids working barefoot around sharp steel." He rubbed the back of his neck. "He made me better without making me small." Not many men can do that. A kid in a red hoodie ran by, almost tripping over an extension cord. Harlan barked, "Watch your line." The kid waved an apology and kept going. Harlan shook his head. "We don't train perfect. We train repeatable." He walked me through the rest of the shop. Rows of tools labeled with masking tape. Shelves of scrap wood waiting for second chances. Every surface held fingerprints of people trying to learn their way back into dignity. Before I left, Harlan handed me a folder of schedules and a laminated list of pass holders. "Keep that," he said. "It's a small miracle. 40 kids and only 1 stolen wrench." He chuckled at his own line, then grew serious. Walter would have been proud. He said you needed to get your hands dirty again. I think he meant literally and otherwise, I said. "Yeah," he replied. He usually did. When I stepped outside, sawdust clung to my cuffs and my collar. It smelled like purpose. I stood there on the cracked sidewalk, folder under my arm, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Then the train horn blew from the east, long, echoing. I started walking back toward the station, head down against the wind. On the bench by the depot, I pulled out the map. Something new had been tucked under one of the folds. It was another of Walter's notes, written in his stiff all-capital style. "Downtown branch. Dollar key." There was a circle drawn around my own city. The $sign key was already on my ring. It caught the late sunlight. Dull but ready. Home was next. And waiting there, whatever Walter thought came after lamps and planes. The coffee barely steamed in the mug I held, but it gave my hands something to do. I stood in the kitchen of Walter's house. Same faded linoleum under my boots, same hum from the old fridge, and stared at the hallway like it owed me something. That closet waited. But first the bank. Downtown was only 10 minutes away, but my pulse ran like I was late for court. I parked in Walter's usual spot behind the branch, third from the end, and walked in like I'd done it 100 times. Only now I wasn't tagging along. I was holding the key. Mr. Klein stood by the lobby door with his hands folded in front of him. He was the kind of bank manager who still wore a three-piece suit and meant it. He shook my hand like he already knew what was about to change. "Your grandfather prepared this well," he said, then led me to the vault room without asking for ID. He pointed to a steel drawer near the top, number 14. The dollar sign key clicked on the first try. Inside was a slim navy folder stamped founding papers in clean white block letters. Beneath it sat a typed letter folded sharp, like someone used a ruler. Klein handed it to me carefully like it might explode. It read, "Upon completion of the 5 service tasks assigned through personal delivery and documented with photographic and/or beneficiary validation, all director-level authority of the Ellison Small Works Trust transfers to Lawson Ellison. Effective immediately." Underneath the letter was a necklace chain with a 6th key on it. No tag, no label, just a small etched heart on the bow. Klein stepped back, watching me take it all in. "Your grandfather's instructions were clear. The dollar key's final step is to seed a low-fee sub-account today. Name it, fund it, start it small. Microgrants can begin by next week." I nodded. Words still stuck somewhere between my throat and gut. He handed me a form. "You can name the sub-account whatever you like, but once it's filed, it's live." I thought for a second, then printed in block letters, "Walter Ellison Small Works Fund." The initial deposit came from the general trust account. Klein processed it while I sat staring at the 6th key. That deposit closed out the 5th service task. The transfer in Walter's letter took effect as we filed it. I didn't need him to say where it went next. I already knew. In the back of the folder was a Polaroid of a hall closet. Walter's coat hung just like I remembered, and on the shelf above it sat a box with a brass latch. On the back of the photo, in his writing, "Last stop." Klein set one more folder on the table. Inside was the deed to Walter's house, moved into a living trust he'd formed 2 summers back. He'd listed me as successor trustee. It was clean, recorded, legal. Kara had been pushing to list the house for weeks. Bev already had their realtor lined up, probably halfway through a listing draft. I walked out to the bank lobby and called Rachel Dodd, a local attorney Walter used once. She picked up on the second ring. "Rachel, it's Lawson Ellison. I've got some documents I need reviewed ASAP. Can I send you photos?" "Send them now," she said. "You're probably more solid than you think." 10 minutes later, she called back. "You're solid," she confirmed. "Deeds in the trust. You can halt any sale attempts. I'll file the notice." Relief hit hard. I dropped my phone twice, trying to put it back in my pocket. In the car, I sat with the folder open across my lap. There was one more piece I hadn't touched yet. A narrow, leather-bound ledger tucked beneath the founding documents like a secret. The first page was dated 6 years ago. Every line listed a name, a small dollar amount, and a simple note beside it. "Fix freezer 86, strings for L, 20 towers, bail for K, 500, no questions." The handwriting got shakier toward the end, but never sloppy. The margins were clean. The math always added up. I flipped to the last page and stared at the final entry. "Future repairs for LE as needed." That cracked something open I didn't even know I was protecting. I sat there and cried like a man who had held his breath for years. No noise, just breath and tears and heat flushing out of me like a fever. It wasn't pretty. I let it happen anyway. My phone buzzed again. Kara. Realtor shows the house Friday at noon. I stared at it for a second, then typed back, "House is in trust. Please cancel." 2 minutes later, Bev replied, "We'll see about that." I texted Rachel the exchange. She sent back one line. "Let me see." I believed her. That night, I drove straight back to Walter's house. The porch light flickered, same as it always had. I didn't fix it. I just sat on the old couch in the den, the one that forced your shoulders to sit low and reminded you to breathe. I smoothed the map flat on the coffee table, tracing the lines I'd followed. Ohio, North Carolina, Kansas, Michigan, home. The pencil marks looked thinner now, like they'd spent themselves and were ready to rest. The heart key sat in the center of the map, gleaming against paper yellowed with time. I slipped it onto the chain Walter left, then over my head. It didn't feel heavy. It felt like a medal I hadn't earned yet, but might someday. I slept light that night, but clean. No dreams, no fights, no spinning thoughts, just quiet. In the morning, I brewed weak coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared down the hallway. The closet door was still closed. The sixth key warmed in my palm. Not because of fear. Not anymore. There was only one door left between me and whatever Walter still had to say about the man I used to be, and the one I might still have time to become. The coffee had gone cold by the time I stood up. The hallway lay still and expectant. I walked slow, each step landing like I might scare off whatever came next. The closet door didn't creak, didn't resist, just waited. The heart key turned smooth. No hesitation, no grit in the lock, as if long made ready. I stood there a second, hand on the latch, and felt 11 years old again, waiting outside a principal's office after mouthing off in class. But this wasn't trouble. This was truth. I opened the door. The air inside was still, the kind of still that lives in closed spaces where nothing gets touched unless it matters. On the top shelf sat a cedar box with a small brass hasp. The wood was warm-toned and worn smooth. It smelled faintly of tobacco and old varnish. Walter's smell, like a memory that never fully left. I reached up, took it down with both hands, and sat on the floor with my back to the hallway wall. For a second, I just held it. No music, no noise, just the tick of the house, baseboard cracks, and the refrigerator cycling like the walls were remembering me too. The clasp popped with a small snap. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was me. I was 23. Hair too long, jaw set, eyes hard like I was daring the world to swing first. I was holding a tape measure like a weapon, not a tool. One hand gripped tight around the metal end, the other halfway open like I was about to snap it shut. On the back of the photo, in Walter's shaky but deliberate hand, "You're already different. Count what counts. I always believed in you. W." I pressed the photo to my leg and breathed through my nose until my chest stopped shaking. No check, no contract, no performance review, just that. Beneath the photo sat Walter's pocket watch, the one he always wore in the vest that made him look like a man born in a better time. I flipped it open. 3 words were engraved inside the lid. No dates, no initials, just steady, steady, steady. I let the weight of it sit in my hand for a while. I could almost hear him say it. That rhythm he used when things got too loud. When Kara shouted through walls or I was drunk with doubt about jobs I hadn't gotten. Tucked under the watch was something smaller, a folded ticket stub from the 1999 county fair. The ink was faded, but the memory hit like a hammer. We'd stood at the small projects table, shoulder to shoulder, staring too long at the crooked step stool we'd built. I remember him saying, "Don't fix it, own it." And we stood there pretending we weren't proud of it. We were. I leaned back against the hallway wall and let the quiet wrap around me. The kind that doesn't come from absence, but from being exactly where you're supposed to be. The house ticked with its old rhythms. I used to hide out here on weekends to dodge Kara's moods or Bev's opinions about my worth. This place had always been steady when nothing else was. A buzz snapped through the silence. My phone face down on the floor next to me. It was an email from a paralegal I didn't recognize representing Kara. Subject line, "Request for marital interest in deceased assets." The message was colder than most. It asked for full records of my personal accounts going back 3 years, any receipts tied to Walter's trust, and a written declaration of my intentions for the property. I stared at it for a long minute. Then I looked at the watch again, still open, still ticking, my jaw unclenched without me even noticing. I cracked my knuckles once, then typed a short reply. "Please address through counsel. I'm not discussing this with you." I hit send and didn't reread it. In the kitchen, I found Walter's old leather notebook, the one he kept in the drawer next to the stove with the batteries and twist ties and that green flashlight that never worked. The front page had his list of shop sayings. The first one read, "Measure twice, trust once." I tore a sticky note from the pad beside the phone and copied it down in my own handwriting. Then I stuck it to the fridge just below the magnet shaped like a wrench. I opened 2 windows in the front room and let the fall air drift in. It smelled like dry leaves and pine sap. The house hadn't breathed in a long time. Maybe I hadn't either. Back in the hallway, I looked at the open box. I took the photo of me at 23 and slid it behind the watch's lid so Walter's words would sit against my face every time I opened it. That kid in the photo thought the world owed him something. The man holding it now knew better. I looked around at the closet. Nothing else left. Nothing hidden, just what mattered. Then I stood up. My knees cracked. My back ached, but it felt earned, not worn. There were calls I needed to make, people I owed follow-ups, promises to keep, and maybe even a few I could finally start making. And one quiet shot, just one, at doing right by Walter, without begging, without yelling, without letting anyone make me small again. I sat at Walter's old desk, the surface still nicked from years of real use, and started making calls with the heart key hanging against my chest. It didn't clink or shift. It just stayed there like it had a job to do, same as me. First was Silas. He answered on the second ring with a grunt like he was mid-stitch. "I'm building the Walter Ellison Small Works Fund," I told him. "No board, no titles, just people who knew him and gave a damn. You in?" "You already know I am," he said. "I'll bind the journals. Folks can write how the money gets used. Keeps them honest, keeps them grateful." Next was Rena. "Name the date," she said, not even pausing. "I'll record a promo spot, no charge. Walter paid me in miles and music. I owe him back." Jamal and Rana picked up together on speaker. "We're sketching already," Jamal said before I finished the sentence. "Gear list for apprentices, only the stuff they'll actually use. We're cutting it down to size," Rana added. Walter wouldn't want clutter. He liked tools that earned their space. Last was Harland. "No suits, no grant speak, and no Zoom meetings," he said. "None of that," I promised. "Then I'll give shop hours for kids who don't own tools at home," he said. "We'll run it like Walter would have. No pity, just plans." I met with Rachel Dodd that afternoon at her office over a used bookstore. Her handshake was short, sharp, and all business. "We're setting up a charitable sub-fund," I told her. "Nothing flashy, tight purpose, clear edges." She nodded. "Name?" I said it slow, like I was measuring weight before lifting it. "Walter Ellison Small Works Fund." "Good," she said. "Fits in the mouth." "That matters." We filed the paperwork that day. Rachel handed me a checklist on my way out. "Change the locks. Post notice. Keep receipts." I did exactly that. Walter's house got new locks, properly documented with a witness, Gary from the hardware store, signing the form in his grease-streaked apron. I posted a note on the door. "Closed for family work." Nothing else. It said enough. Kara left a voicemail the next morning. She cried for 2 minutes about being shut out. I didn't call her back. I forwarded the voicemail to Rachel, then deleted it. Bev tried a new angle. Showed up at the porch in a pastel blazer and knockoff pearls. "Walter wanted family to benefit," she said. Loud and confident, like she was reading off a teleprompter. I handed her a manila envelope with printed copies of Walter's ledger pages. At the bottom, in my handwriting, I'd written, "We are the ones who benefit when we help." I slid it across the porch rail and said, "You can keep this copy." Bev didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. That night, Dale, my old boss, emailed me again. A full invoice this time, accusing me of stealing an orbital sander and claiming lost profits. I pulled up my toolbox photos, circled the matching serial numbers, attached the police report from March about the tools his shop lost, 2 of mine, and sent it all back. Then I copied his landlord and added, "Please advise if this qualifies as business harassment." Harlan texted me 5 minutes later. Proud of that one. Hit clean. It felt like doing a push-up after years of sitting down. Harder than it should have been, but proof I still could. Later that week, I called Aiden, my sister's boy. 13, tall, quiet, the kind of kid who looks down when he talks. I asked if he wanted to come to open night at the makerspace. "I'm not good at stuff," he said after a pause. Neither was I told him, until I was. He agreed to try. I printed the first batch of forms. Simple, clean, clear numbers. $400 micro grants, $2,500 small shop upgrades, $6,000 youth program blocks. No more, no less. Small enough to manage, big enough to matter. Rena and I spent a Saturday morning drafting a short scholarship for first recordings. Local artists, no prior funding, 1-page demo pitch. She handled the language. I handled the math. Jamal and Rana's gear list was longer than a tool aisle, but we cut it down. We chose enough, not everything. That was the difference. I stapled the first check stubs to copies of the original Polaroids and placed them one by one into Walter's keybox. The sound of the lid clicking shut each time felt like progress, like continuity without ceremony. The map still sat folded on the kitchen table, but I didn't need it to tell me where to go next. Now came the real part. Not the keys, not the boxes, not the notes from a man who saw further than I ever had. Now came the test. Doing the work in daylight with people watching and with the critics still circling, waiting for a misstep. The middle school smelled like pencil shavings and faint cafeteria bleach. Ms. Paxton met us at the side door with a clipboard and the kind of nod that meant she was trying not to smile too much. We delivered all 36 journals hand-stitched by Silas. Rena set up her field recorder on a dented lunch tray and asked the kids to say thank you one by one. Most were shy, a few goofy. One boy, maybe 11, stood up and said, "I'm going to write my dad back. I haven't before." I swallowed hard and nodded like I could handle that. I barely could. Rena put me back on air the next day. 3-minute spot. She hit record, gave me the countdown, then leaned back and let it roll. I read slow. No jokes, no explanations, just the announcement of our first 2 music stipends. $800 each. One for studio time, one for instrument rental. I didn't apologize for my voice. Calls lit up anyway. At Haddad's. Marta and Chris unboxed their new toolkits like it was Christmas morning you had to earn. Jamal lined up their gear on the table and handed each a bottle of oil and a rag. "You oil the blades before the fabric," he said. "Respect first." Marta asked how to hold the shears without making her wrist lock up. Jamal showed her. I watched her try it again, slower, more certain. It made something settle in me. Harland rolled out the team passes at the makerspace like he was dealing cards at a clean table. Aiden showed up late, hood up, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. I kept my distance. He picked a station with clamps and wood glue and didn't say a word for the first hour. He left that night holding a small wooden phone stand with tight corners and a crooked finish. His grin tilted sideways like he was trying not to let it all the way out. That one stuck with me. Later that week, I watched a mom sign out a cordless drill with a baby strapped to her chest. She tested the weight, nodded once, and walked out like she just remembered who she was. This is how you fix a life, I thought. Holes first, then frames. Then Dale showed up. He walked into the makerspace, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. Tight smile, fake cheer, that edge he always carried under his collar. I was standing near the drill press when he said, loud enough for the room to pause, "Didn't think I'd see you playing social worker." I turned, chest already tight, but Harlan stepped in like he'd been waiting for it. "This is a members-only space," Harlan said, flat but firm. "You can join or you can leave." Dale looked at me like he expected a fight. I didn't give him one. He muttered something and walked out. I didn't follow. I didn't have to. That night, Kara texted another apology. This one came with a screenshot of her bank balance and a sad emoji. I didn't answer. Rachel did. She sent over a clean settlement offer for the divorce. Nothing from Walter's assets included. It was simple, fair, clear. Silas mailed me a bound book, leather cover, stitched corners, and a deep red ribbon sewn into the spine. On the bottom corner was a small WE stamp. Inside were stories, dozens of them from first grant recipients. Pages of what they'd bought, what they'd built, what they planned next. I ran my thumb across the cover until my nail left a dent. We had kids trying microphones, tailors taking real measurements, teens learning how to clamp boards before cutting anything. The rooms weren't loud, but they were full. I drove past Walter's block late one night. The porches had lights on. Lawns looked mowed. A few mailboxes had fresh paint. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was something else. At home, I printed our first month totals. 8 grants, 2 stipends, 40 passes, 1 troll turned away at the door. I stuck the sheet to the fridge with the wrench magnet and wrote, "Keep going" underneath in permanent marker. Rena sent me a photo from the station bulletin board. A kid had drawn a cartoon hand holding 5 different keys. At the top, in crooked pencil, it said, "We help here." She added, "Looks like a logo." I laughed out loud, standing alone in Walter's quiet kitchen. The drawer of the key box creaked when I opened it. I slid the next batch of paperwork inside along with copies of grant approvals, Polaroids, and thank you notes. Every line meant something now. 1 year to the day since that lawyer slid me a pass and a pocket full of keys, I found myself driving toward a rented farmhouse I didn't own and a meeting I had no business running. Except now I did. The porch groaned under my boots, but it held. We'd fixed the boards with leftover lumber and stubbornness. The paint on the windowsill was still tacky in spots. Rena called it honest work. I liked that. We rented the farmhouse with 3 signatures and a pile of donated supplies. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The wind moved different out here, like it respected what we were trying to do. Silas showed up first, early like always. He carried a box of blank notebooks tied with twine and a tray of biscotti he claimed was homemade. He hugged me the way old school men do. Slap on the back, then another, then a nod that meant something longer. I brought enough for 2 schools, he said, setting the box on the porch bench. And the cookies are dry. Nobody pretend they're not. Rena rolled in next. Her hair was up, her eyes tired, mic bag slung over one shoulder like she hadn't stopped moving in days. We've got 3 kids on air this month, she said. One sings, one reads poems, one just tells stories about her grandma's porch. She paused. The poems hit harder than the songs. You're proud, I said. She didn't answer. She just smiled. That real kind that doesn't need words. Jamal and Rana arrived with their apprentices, Marta and Chris, who both looked taller, sharper, faster than before. They wore their left-handed shears clipped to their belts like trophies. They're faster than us already, Jamal said. No jealousy in his voice, just pride polished smooth. Harlan came last, pushing a cart with a clear display case on top. Inside was Walter's old hand plane, mounted but not locked down. Not for display, he said. Just a reminder. Pass it along without losing it. We ate simple food on folding chairs. Sandwiches, thermoses, half-sliced apples in a dented bowl. No catered lunch, no title cards, just people and purpose. The budget sat on a legal pad. Rena added numbers with a pencil. Silas corrected her decimal once. We didn't use PowerPoint. We used names. I gave them the update. The settlement was signed. No more texts, no more screenshots. Kara had taken her part and gone quiet. Dale's shop closed down a month ago. Not a fire, not a scandal, just faded. I didn't cheer, I just breathed. Aiden stood at the edge of the porch, quiet as ever, holding something behind his back. When everyone quieted, he stepped forward and handed me a small wooden box. For the keys, he said. I made it right this time. The corners match. I opened it, ran my fingers along the mitered edges. Tight, clean, solid. You made Walter proud, I said, voice tight. You made me proud. He nodded, then sat back down like he hadn't just cracked me open. We took one vote. Keep it small. Keep it fast. If we couldn't understand a grant request in one page, we sent it back to be clearer. No paperwork mazes, no corporate fluff. Walter's rules written in real time. I looked around the table and saw faces that made me steadier. People who knew how to hold weight without making it heavier. People who believed in the work and in each other. Silas wiped biscuit crumbs off his journal. We're building something stitched, not stacked, he said. Rena nodded. It's not loud, but it echoes. I'm not the kid Walter took to the fair anymore. I don't grip tape measures like weapons now. I measure softer. I still curse when I miss the mark, but I don't throw things anymore. Walter told me once, let the slow stuff work. Back then I thought he meant machines. Now I know he meant people. Money grows different than people. If you do it right, one can make the other better, but the people come first, always. That's the only return I track now. Human first, dollar second, faith threaded through both. When the meeting ended, nobody clapped. We stood up, stretched, walked onto the porch. The light had changed. The sky shifted just enough to remind us the day was closing. I reached into my pocket, pulled out Walter's watch, and twisted it open. I said it out loud so I could hear it in my own voice. No echo, no second guessing. Steady, steady, steady. And for the first time since I was 35, I believed it. What would you fix first if someone gave you a second chance to rebuild your life, your work, your family, or yourself? Share your answer or any comment like good story if it spoke to you. And if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. It means a lot to us and it's only one click for you. YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.